The Apache woman woke to the sound of harsh voices outside her small, dim room. The walls were wooden and bare, the floor cold under her feet. She tried to remember how she had come here, but the memory was sharp and bitter. Only days ago, she had been with her people, running across the desert plains, free beneath the endless sky. Now, she was far from home, surrounded by strangers who saw her not as a person. Each morning, she was forced to rise before the sun, given only a thin blanket and a meager meal. The food was unfamiliar, tasteless, and her stomach ached as she tried to eat it. Her captors watched her constantly, as though any moment of weakness would be an excuse for punishment. She learned quickly to move quietly, to speak softly if spoken to, and to keep her thoughts to herself. Every glance from her captors reminded her that she had no rights, that her life was considered less than theirs. Despite this, she did not allow despair to take her completely. In the quiet moments, she remembered the stories her grandmother had told her, stories of strong Apache women who had endured hardships and never lost their spirit. She whispered those stories to herself at night, letting them strengthen her heart. Even though her body was trapped, her mind remained free. The woman observed her surroundings with careful attention. She noticed the guards' routines, the times when they were most relaxed, and the small moments when doors were left slightly open. She learned which captors were cruel and which, if any, showed a hint of kindness. In her mind, she began to make silent plans, tiny steps toward survival. Each day, she tested her strength, lifting her arms higher during chores, walking faster during errands, proving to herself that her body had not been broken. One morning, as she worked near the edge of the camp, she noticed a man watching her from a distance. He was not like the others. His eyes were soft and careful, and he did not shout or order her around. He simply watched. She could not read his intentions, but something in his gaze felt different, almost human. She continued her work, pretending not to notice him. Yet part of her wondered if he could be a chance for something she had almost forgotten hope. Her captors tried to make her obey with harsh words and threats. They told her she would never return to her people, that her life belonged to them now. They forced her to wear clothes that felt strange and uncomfortable, and they mocked her traditional ways, laughing at her language and gestures. She endured it silently, biting her lip to hold back tears. She learned to mask her pain, to hide the fear in her eyes. She knew that showing weakness would only make her situation worse. At night, when the camp was quiet, she would press her hands to the wooden walls and imagine the wide desert, the rivers, the mountains where her people lived. She could almost feel the wind on her face and hear the laughter of children playing near the river. She remembered the songs, the dances, and the warmth of her family's embrace. Those memories became her secret treasure, a place where no one could reach her. They reminded her that she was not truly lost, only temporarily confined. She began to notice small opportunities. A guard who dozed off at his post, a door left unlocked for a few seconds, a window that could be reached if she stood on a crate. Each small observation was a thread she could pull, a step toward freedom. She did not speak of these thoughts aloud. Her captors would call her foolish, or worse, punish her. Instead, she whispered them to herself in the dark, imagining a path back to the world she loved. One day, while fetching water, she overheard a conversation between two men. They spoke about the settlements nearby, about the families who lived there, and the rules that governed them. She listened carefully, storing every detail in her memory. Every piece of information was a key, and she knew that knowledge might be the only way to escape. She could not act yet, but she was preparing, waiting for the right moment. The man who had been watching her from afar began to approach slowly over the next few days. He did not speak to her directly, at first. He would linger near the edge of her work area, offering small gestures, leaving a piece of bread near her bucket, or standing in a way that blocked the view of a cruel guard. She felt a strange mixture of fear and gratitude. She did not know if she could trust him completely, but his presence was comforting in a world that had been harsh and unkind. Her nights were still the hardest. The cold seeped into her bones, and loneliness weighed on her heart. She whispered her fears into the darkness, hoping someone, anyone, would hear her. And sometimes, in those quiet hours, she whispered something else, her plea. "Release me. I plead with you," she murmured, her voice barely audible even to herself. It was not just a cry for freedom. It was a promise to herself that she would survive, that she would not surrender to despair. As the days passed, she found small ways to reclaim her dignity. She braided her hair carefully, even when she was not allowed to. She cleaned her clothes and kept her small belongings organized, as if her environment reflected her inner strength. She refused to let her captors strip her of her identity entirely. Every small act of care was a quiet rebellion, a reminder that she was more than a captive. She also began to speak with the man who had shown kindness in small ways. At first, it was just gestures, nods, or brief eye contact. Then, one day, he spoke softly, asking her name. She answered, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of trust. They did not talk about escape yet. The risk was too great. But the simple act of recognition, of being seen as a person and not a possession, gave her hope. The Apache woman also observed the other captives in the settlement. Some were broken by fear. Some resigned to their fate. She kept herself apart, refusing to let their despair touch her. She knew that if she lost hope, she would be lost completely. She began to share quiet encouragement with those who were open to it, speaking softly in her language, offering a hand or a kind word. Even in captivity, she found ways to keep her spirit alive. One afternoon, she noticed a small mistake in the camp's routine. A gate left slightly ajar, a guard distracted by another task. She studied it, imagining what it would take to slip through unnoticed. It was not yet time to act, but she felt the thrill of possibility. Each day, she grew more confident in her observations, more certain that freedom was not impossible. Her whispered plea, repeated each night, became a mantra. "Release me. I plead with you." It was a declaration, not just to her captors, but to herself. She refused to let her life be defined by fear or oppression. She clung to her memories, her heritage, and her hope. Even in the darkest moments, she remembered who she was. A strong Apache woman. A survivor. Someone who would endure. As part 1 comes to a close, she stands quietly near the edge of the camp, watching the sunset. The sky stretches wide and golden, reminding her of the lands she once roamed freely. She feels the wind on her face and breathes deeply, silently promising herself that one day she will return to the world she knows. And in that moment, the whispered words escape her lips once more, carried on the wind. The Apache woman woke before dawn, her mind restless but determined. The quiet moments before the camp stirred were her favorite, the only time she could feel some measure of control over her life. She stretched carefully, testing her body's strength, reminding herself that she was still capable, still alive, still human. Her thoughts returned to the man who had shown her small kindnesses. She did not yet fully trust him, but his presence had reminded her that not all people were cruel. Perhaps, she thought, someone could help her escape. The man, whose name she now knew was Thomas, approached her cautiously that morning. He carried a small basket of food, and when he set it near her work area, their eyes met for a long moment. There was a tension in the air, but also something unspoken, a shared understanding. Thomas spoke softly, careful not to draw attention. "I see you. I know this is hard. You do not have to be alone." Her heart stirred with cautious hope. Could someone really understand her plight? Could someone really care? She nodded slightly, unable to find words that would not be overheard. Even this small connection felt revolutionary. It reminded her that she had worth beyond the cruel judgments of her captors. Over the next several days, Thomas watched the camp carefully, learning the guards' routines and listening to their conversations. He spoke to her in whispers when they could meet, in private moments. They shared small pieces of information, little details that might help her survive or escape. He did not promise anything, but he made her feel as though her words and feelings mattered. One afternoon, Thomas came to her with a plan. "I have noticed a gap in the schedule," he said quietly, glancing around. "A moment when the gates are unguarded. You could slip through if you are careful." The woman's heart raced. She had dreamed of freedom, but now that it seemed possible, fear and excitement twisted together in her chest. She nodded, listening to every detail, memorizing the instructions. The days leading up to the escape were tense. The Apache woman continued her daily routines, pretending nothing had changed, all while preparing herself mentally for the risk ahead. She tested her strength, her speed, and her courage. Each evening, she whispered her mantra, "Release me. I plead with you," letting the words steel her resolve. She would not falter. She would not give up. Finally, the moment arrived. The sun had barely risen when she moved quietly through the camp. Thomas had distracted the guards, creating just enough chaos for her to slip away. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to move steadily, keeping her eyes on the path they had planned. She could hear her own breath, the rustle of her feet on dry grass, and the distant voices of those who would never see her as anything but a captive. She reached the gate and paused for a moment, glancing back at the camp. The fear that had haunted her for so long surged up again. Could she really do this? Could she survive beyond these walls? Beyond the people who had kept her imprisoned? She drew a deep breath, recalling the stories her grandmother had told her. Stories of brave Apache women who faced impossible odds. Strength filled her, and she stepped through the gate. Thomas waited a short distance away, guiding her silently toward the forested hills beyond the settlement. The journey was slow and cautious. Every snap of a twig, every movement in the trees made her heart leap. Yet, with Thomas by her side, she felt a measure of security. He offered small words of encouragement, and she clung to them like a lifeline. As they moved deeper into the hills, the woman began to feel the familiar air of the land she loved. The scent of pine and earth, the feel of wind across her face. It all reminded her of home. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to imagine freedom not as a distant dream, but as a tangible reality. Her muscles ached, her feet were sore, but her spirit soared. Night fell, and they made a temporary camp under a thick canopy of trees. She built a small fire, while Thomas kept watch. The light flickered on her face, casting shadows that seemed to mirror the hardships she had endured. She whispered her mantra once more, not just for courage, but as a promise to herself that she would continue, no matter the obstacles ahead. In the quiet hours of the night, she spoke to Thomas more openly than ever before. She told him about her family, the lands of her people, and the life she had known before capture. He listened with patience and respect, never interrupting, never judging. For the first time, she felt that someone truly understood her, that someone cared for her safety and well-being. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten could exist. The following days were filled with careful travel. They avoided roads, moving through forests and along streams, following paths the woman had memorized from childhood stories and her instincts. Thomas proved to be a steady companion, always alert, always ensuring that she remained safe. Their journey was not easy. Hunger and exhaustion tested them, but the thought of freedom kept them moving forward. Eventually, They reached the edge of a small settlement known to offer refuge to those in need. Here, the woman could speak to people who might help her return to her people, or at least protect her from being captured again. She felt a mixture of relief and fear. Relief that she had made it this far, and fear of what new challenges might await. In the settlement, they found a woman who ran a small inn and was known for helping travelers. The innkeeper listened to the Apache woman's story with concern and kindness. She offered food, clean clothes, and a safe place to rest. For the first time, the woman felt a sense of safety. She could sleep without the constant fear of being watched, without the weight of immediate danger pressing on her. As she rested, she reflected on the journey she had survived. She thought about the strength she had discovered within herself, the courage that had carried her through captivity and the escape. She thought about Thomas, whose quiet support had made a critical difference. And she thought about the whispered plea she had repeated each night, the words that had sustained her when hope seemed impossible. "Release me. I plead with you." The Apache woman knew that her journey was not entirely over. She still needed to decide whether to return fully to her tribe or find a safe place to rebuild her life. But she felt empowered, knowing that she could face whatever came next. She had endured fear, hardship, and uncertainty, and she had survived. In the days that followed, she began to regain her voice. She spoke openly with those who would listen, sharing her experiences, telling the truth about the injustices she had faced. People who had once overlooked her plight now listened and learned. Her story became a symbol of resilience, showing that even in the harshest circumstances, a human spirit could not be easily broken. Finally, one evening, she stood on a hill overlooking the forest and the distant plains. The wind carried the familiar sense of home, and she allowed herself a small smile. She had endured captivity, had faced fear, and had claimed her freedom. And though the world would always hold challenges, she knew she could meet them with strength and courage. Her whispered plea, once a desperate call in the darkness, had transformed. It was now a quiet affirmation of survival, of hope, and of the unyielding strength within her. She breathed deeply, feeling the freedom of the land around her, and spoke softly, not to anyone in particular, but to herself. "I am free, and I will endure." The Apache woman's journey had begun with fear and captivity, but it ended with courage and resilience. She had faced a world that tried to strip her of her identity and spirit. Yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Her story was a testament to human endurance, a reminder that hope could survive even in the darkest times.